name is Jeremy, and this is the Cubicle Rebellion podcast. Clocking in once again, and so I read another book, right? So this other book's called Retromania. Okay, so for those of you that don't know, my background is in I went to school at Full Sail University, and got an associate's in recording arts and a bachelor's in music business. So a lot of my views of the world come from a creative standpoint, a musical standpoint. I use a lot of musical metaphors. So me working in the cubicle is a far cry from where I began. But outside of that, I read this book and it was about music. So I'm trying to give you some background as to why I was drawn to it. And I had a couple of takeaways. Like I said, the book is called Retromania, and he made some really really interesting points that I've never considered, never thought about, and he put words to things that I hadn't considered or couldn't find the words to express. And I was like, I think that's what that is. I think he figured that out. So anyway, sure. Some of these perspectives are a little controversial, a little, sure some people will disagree and have counterpoints, and that's cool. But if anything, if it stimulates the conversation, I think that's more than enough. So here are a few takeaways. First one: the young artists today are obsessed with the past and therefore fail to be innovative. Number two: technology is the most popular genre of music. And three: post-production is the new music production. Okay? So let me read those again. Young artists are obsessed with the past and therefore fail to be innovative. Number two, technology is the most popular genre of music. And number three, post-production is the new music production. So, young artists. Start with young artists. Okay. So he gives the example of with today's music streaming services, you have the complete catalogs of the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Louis Armstrong, Stevie Wonder. I mean, everybody. You got the catalogs of all these geniuses, right? And it's available at the touch of a finger. And this is obviously a good thing. I mean, having that kind of access is great, and no one's going to debate that. And it's great for people who are fans of that music to be able to access it so easily. But however, the part of the problem with music in the 2000s is that today's younger artists are reluctant to let go of music's glorious past. As a result of it, because we have access to the past, we kind of don't want to let go of it. So he says, therefore, the popular music genres from the 1960s to the 1990s are still popular today and continue to attract young artists, which results in a lack of innovative music. Now, innovative, quote unquote, we can define innovative in a lot of different ways. Take it as you will. But anyway, I just thought the conversation was interesting. I know we can debate all day back and forth about what's considered innovative and what's not, and how do you define innovation. Because I'm a big fan of sampling, in hip hop. So, and I think that's innovative, taking old things and remixing them and whatnot. So, whatever. Anyway, interesting nonetheless. So he says this wasn't always the case. He said, so if you look at past generations and younger generations of the past, they tended to routinely rebel against their parents' music, or simply just wipe the slate clean and introduce a whole new movement. But what he noticed in our generation, the Millennial Generation, is there's much more nostalgia than there is rebellion. Now, take that as you will, but I just found that to be pretty interesting. I'm like, he's kind of not lying. That's I can see where he's coming from. So there's much more nostalgia than there is rebellion. So that's point one. Point two, technology is the most popular genre of music. Technology is the most popular genre of music. All right. So when you think about it, these days, music and technology are more entangled than ever. Even your own listening habits are probably relied heavily on your computer or your phone or whatever. It's relied on technology. Music and technology are one nowadays. And in all likelihood, the 2000s will be remembered as an era of technological innovations in music rather than as one of musical innovations. I'm going to say that again. Technological innovations in music rather than as one of musical innovations. So the 2000s might as well be marked more by its technology than its music. People are innovating new ideas with tech than they are with music, right? He gives the example in the past. Bands like the Beatles, David Bowie, Bob Dylan, et cetera, were responsible for musical innovations. But these days, however, the major musical innovations include, it's the iPad, it's the YouTube, Spotify, Pandora, you know. You're listening to me probably on one of these devices, one of these services, Technology has almost, superseded the artist in a way. The artists are no longer the superstar. Technology is the biggest superstar. you know, Technology might be bigger than Beyonce. I'm not even sure that's a might. Technology is bigger than name your favorite artist. And it's completely intertwined with music. The two are inseparable. People aren't creating new genres of music, not like that, not that I know of. Now I'm sure somebody can probably come at me and point out someone that's doing something truly different or truly innovative, however you define that. But truth be told, when it comes to tech and music, man, they're one and the same now, almost. But he goes on to say, the changes in the music scene now have less to do with musical styles and more to do with accessibility, interconnectedness, and how quickly you can tap into a new global musical network. Again, tech, right? Technology influences almost, technology influences us more than inspiration does. And inspiration is needed for innovation. You need inspiration to create and to innovate. But if technology is influencing your inspiration, or if technology is influencing you more than inspiration, then where are you getting your inspiration from? And then where does innovation come from? I'm not sure if that makes sense or not. I know I kind of fumbled through that, but it's just something to think about. It's a lot in that, But it just goes to show you how the landscape has completely changed. For the better, for the worse, with its good and bad and everything, but it's something to consider. So he gives this example of this guy. I do not know how to say his name. It's Gonjasufi, Gonjasufi, I guess. But he's a musician from Los Angeles whose work is influenced by immersion of music from Mexico, Ethiopia, and America, right? So he says his work is further influenced by technology that allows him to take scraps from diverse genres and stitch them together into strange musical quotes, right? The basic structure of his music takes elements from hip-hop, but then there are like melodic layers informed by 60s punk and psychedelic music, as well as the trance and rave scenes. Now, I've never heard of that genre, that mashup before. I don't even know what that would sound like. I should probably go find it, but anyway, he says the effect of bringing all these influences together creates a timeless kind of music that seems to transcend the particularity of a genre. Nonetheless, critics, have coined a term for him, which is basically called a super hybrid. So he's found a way to kind of mash up almost everything he could grab, and I guess you could define that as innovation, But I guess his whole point was that most of us we're so drowned in technology. Technology has just become part of our lives. It's become part of who we are, part of our day-to-day routines, and it's informed how we view the world. And music has been no different in terms of how it's been used. Like I said before, tech and music are intertwined. Spotify, iPods, Apple Music, like it's it's no longer physical disc or vinyl, or it's just ones and zeros. It's streaming. It's Wi-Fi. It's music that's being streamed. It's flying through the air. It's going from one device to another. It's going from one network to another. It's not even, you can't even touch it anymore. It's its own thing. Back in the day, you get a CD. You could physically touch the case, open up the case. I had like a whole library of music. In physical disc. Open up the booklet. I mean, I'm nostalgic for this stuff. It's kind of proving this point because I kind of miss some of that. I feel like you slowed down and there was a whole experience to an album as a whole. Track 1 through 16. There was a reason why he put that interlude. At track number 5, and then why number 6 came in the way that it did. It was conceptual. It was a purpose behind. It was an intentionality behind it. You know what I'm saying? And technology came and just I mean, I don't want to say destroyed it, but it just blew it all away. Now everything is measured differently, and how many streams can you get, and the single, and essentially, I mean, we kind of we live off of playlists now, not necessarily albums. We've converted to sort of playlists, like it's a buffet style musical experience, where we want to kind of pick and choose what we want and kind of mash it up together the way we want to, for our lives. Everything is centered around how our lives are going and what we want to hear at what time, at what point, and it's less about the conceptual art of of an album. I'm a big Lauryn Hill fan, big Stevie Wonder fan, big Kanye fan, and I think about their albums, and there was an intentionality behind why each song was placed the way that it was. But like I said, tech has turned that upside down and has made it into something that's just different. I don't know if it's bad or worse, but the artist in me wants to scream that it's worse. But the I guess the innovator in me, or the the big picture guy in me, wants to kind of see the positive in it, I guess. But anyway, like I said, that was a part of this that was really interesting to me, is that technology is the most popular genre of music. It's supplanted everything. It's a part of, I don't know. It's so much more to be said about that I can't even. I don't know. For the sake of time, I just want to keep moving. But it's just there's so much in that that's like that has yet to be explored. It's like, man, tech has just revolutionized everything. It's just changed the whole game. But anyway, let me move forward. And the last point I was going to make was post-production is essentially the new music production. So post-production essentially has kind of taken precedence over production, and this in turn reflects our post-industrial world, right? So like, in short, how do I put this? Like, music has kind of always reflected the times, and essentially what he's saying with this next section I'm about to go into is that, our music kind of reflects where we are, and what our lives are like now. We live in a post-industrial world, no one's working in factories anymore, But let me kind of summarize this last section. So, just as technology has changed the way we listen to music, it has also altered the way music is made. In the world of modern pop music, the focus has shifted from how music can be produced to how it can be manipulated in post-production. So this means that today's musicians are less concerned with playing and composing music and spend more time reworking, editing, and remixing existing music. The epitome of the post-production musician is really the DJ. The DJ, he entertains the dance floor audience by taking existing music and reassembling it in clever or surprising ways and adding tempo and volume changes, manipulating your emotions, all without really creating anything new. Now, again, some would argue that that is new, and I'm not. I don't care either way. Like it's cool. I'm cool with it. It's fine. I have no, you know. But like I said, the perspective is interesting. It got my brain going. So anyway, but this he said this is by definition a form of post production. What a DJ does. They use material that was produced earlier, most of which is pop music created in the 30 years following World War II. And much of the time, they're using the creative work of, obviously, black musicians who made soul, funk, disco, and R&B. And with this in mind, you can even look at the shift from production to post-production in music as a reflection of how our Western economy has developed. So, after all, many of the great eras, in musical production coincided spatially and temporally with industrial production. Motown, okay? So think about Motown. Doo-wop, Diana Ross and the Supremes, Marvin Gaye, all those groups back then. They took off at the beginning of the automobile boom in Detroit, right? And Motown obviously was an abbreviation of Motor Town. Again, the music was a correlation to what was happening at the time, and even Barry Gordy, I think he was even quoted saying, I think he either read this or watched this, but he basically said that he set up Motown to basically function like a factory. He set up Motown. It was an assembly line. It was a structured, well-oiled machine, which is why it worked so well. It worked so well for him. And I even read somewhere that I think Smokey Robinson did this interview on the Breakfast Club, and he said something that really struck me, if I remember correctly. He said something to the effect of, like, even when Diana Ross, like the great Diana Ross, like at the peak of her powers, would go out on tour, she would have to come back and go through, I guess, essentially like a training camp and get refreshed on. It was artist development to, refine to perfection. She would have to go back, and she was treated just like any other artist, and she would go back and go through her etiquette classes and how to get out of a car properly, how to get out of a car properly. She had a dress on, how to act and deal with the media, how to respond, it was artist development in its purest and best form. Like, it was amazing. But again, it was down to Motown was a reflection of Motortown, which was a reflection of the factories and the assembly line that those artists were operating out of. They one puts on the tire, then the other puts on the bolt, and the other puts on the other thing, and then the thing that connects to the thing, and then everything was working together. And no artist was too big. And he gives an example even with heavy metal. He was saying how heavy metal is born in the West Midlands of the United Kingdom, and which was the center of British automobile manufacturing at the time. Again, heavy metal. Heavy metal was a reflection of factories. It's just an incredible insight. I just thought that was really interesting. But so anyway, so you can look at DJs in the same way. So like DJs, right? DJs have grown in popularity in probably the past 5 or 10 years, and the dominance of post production, what you do after the music is done, in music, and that's almost a reflection of today's white collar workforce, who spend the majority of their time in offices instead of manufacturing and building like a factory. There's more scrolling, clicking, programming, and designing, and the music reflects that. You think about Pro Tools and Fruity Loops and all those different DAWs that artists and engineers use, and a lot of the time the music is created after the music has been recorded. The final product is more about what you've done after the fact than what you did during. you know. So in a sense, modern pop music is the perfect reflection of our post-industrial world. So sterile, edited, auto-tuned, digitized, perfect, quote unquote, 100%, no errors. Like I said, Fruity Loops and Pro Tools and music is no different than Excel and Word in corporate America. Everything has a nice little cell. Everything is perfectly aligned. I can't help but think about T-Pain, but I just think about like how robotic he sounded, him and Akon back in the day, and it's just like, it's interesting because it's like they kind of sounded like part machine in a way. Look, I don't care one way or another how you feel about them. I don't, good or bad, whatever. But it's just an interesting observation. There's something to that. Like, there's something to be said about what this guy pointed out. And I'm like, I don't think he's wrong. And what do we do with that? What do with that, and how do we move forward? But anyway, like I said, it's not a false impression. The current music scene kind of lacks innovation and relies too strongly on recreating and remixing the styles of bygone musical eras. This is his words, not mine, but like I said, this is interesting. And we need a new revolution so that the music of the 2000s can be remembered for something more than just the iPod. The greatest artist of our generation might not be Beyoncé, but Steve Jobs. So, anyway, like I said, just some things to think about as a creative person. If you happen to be sitting in a cubicle, and if you're listening to this on Spotify, you're listening to your Spotify music or whatever, Apple Music, whatever, YouTube. It's just something to think about. It kind of makes you more aware of how our society is working and sort of the gears behind what's pulling the strings behind the curtains and how things have been moving from generation to generation. So anyway, this was a little longer, but hopefully you got something to take away from that. A good conversation starter. Like I said, appreciate you guys listening, and I will see you next time.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.